January 22nd, 1996.
It's been 20 years in the making.
When we started, we were going to launch in January of 1982 and would have arrived at Jupiter in 1985. So as it turns out, we're just a decade late.
Now, after 6 years in space and a 2.3 billion mile journey, with more ups and downs than a roller coaster.
This has been like watching one of those old movies, The Perils of Pauline. We have had practically everything happen to this poor spacecraft along its way.
The Galileo spacecraft has sent the first man-made probe, hurtling into the fiery atmosphere of Jupiter.
What it's telling us is that Jupiter is different than we'd anticipated, and we're going to have to revise some of our theories about how planets form, what the early solar system was like.
Tonight, Galileo phones in a report from Jupiter.
This is ABC News Nightline. Substituting for Ted Koppel and reporting from Washington, Chris Wallace.
The Galileo spacecraft has faced one obstacle after another on its journey to Jupiter. The Challenger shuttle disaster, a roundabout route that started in the wrong direction, an antenna that failed to open properly, and a tape recorder that stuck in rewind. Then, when a probe finally entered Jupiter's atmosphere and sent back remarkable scientific data, release of the information was delayed more than a month by the federal budget shutdown. Despite all that, when the scientists finally got to announce their findings today, they were brimming over with excitement. It turns out that Jupiter is drier, windier, with less helium, and a different cloud structure than they expected. If you're asking, so what, just know this, that scientists are now busy rethinking how the solar system was formed. But as we said, the story of Galileo is special for its human drama as well as its new information. And ABC science correspondent Michael Gillen has been tracking both. Michael, how different is our picture of Jupiter tonight?
Well, Chris, it isn't as though the scientists were expecting Dr. Jekyll and found Mr. Hyde. It's more like when a person sees a Hollywood celebrity for the first time in person, it might occur to them the person looks a little taller, a little heavier, a little older maybe than they do on the screen. By the same token, that little probe that plunged into Jupiter's atmosphere and saw the planet for the first time up close and personal didn't see the planet we expected to. Now, technicalities aside, what it all adds up to is that we really are no longer sure how Jupiter was formed, and never mind just Jupiter, but planets in general, including the Earth.
Of all those slight differences, what was the biggest surprise in what we found out today?
You know, scientists found, as they expected, hydrogen, helium, ammonia, but they didn't find any of the larger molecules, the large, complex organic molecules, which are the basis of life. But that isn't the full story yet. You know, the probe incinerated itself. It gave its life to science, collecting all this data. But there is still that mothership orbiting Jupiter, and it's going to get very close-up looks at some of the moons, some of which scientists believe do harbor life. So, you know, scientists have waited a long time for this, Chris, and as you're about to see in my report, they're hoping and expecting that the best is yet to come.
If all goes as planned, for the next 2 years, the Galileo mothership will orbit Jupiter and its 16 moons, sending us an avalanche of images and information on the largest and arguably the most spectacular planet in the neighborhood. A happy ending to a mission that had more bad luck than Apollo 13.
My wife has names for Galileo that I won't repeat here, but it becomes an extended part of your family.
We've spanned a generation, so wherever we were when we started, that's where our children pretty much are today.
Well, this has been like watching one of those old movies, The Perils of Pauline. We have had practically everything happen to this poor spacecraft along its way.
Project scientist Taurus Johnson remembers when it all began back in 1974. Richard Nixon was struck low by Watergate. But NASA was riding high. After landing on the moon 6 times and giving us spectacular overhead views of Mercury, Venus, and Mars, it left us wanting more.
When I first realized that there were serious people beginning to think about going to Jupiter and beyond, I said, wow, can we really do that?
During those early years, Johnson and his wife were planning a family. Son Aaron was born in 1973, daughter Eleanor in 1975.
And we're doing precisely the same thing with our scientific work. We were planning a baby Galileo.
As it turned out, NASA's pregnancy lasted 15 years. That's how long it took from the moment of conception to the moment of liftoff. During that time, scientists kept changing Galileo's design, and no one was even sure how it was going to be launched.
The launch vehicles that were available to NASA at this period of time included large expendable launch vehicles, and the most powerful of those was the Titan Centaur. That is what launched the Vikings to Mars, for instance, that landed in '76.
But NASA decided to launch Galileo using the brand new shuttle, which proved so unreliable an original launch date of 1982 was put off until 1986.
In the family area, my parents were beginning to get older, and in 1985, a year before we were supposed to launch Galileo, my father passed away.
Challenger, go at throttle up. Challenger, go at throttle up.
In 1986, just months before Galileo was to be launched, the Challenger explosion caused the entire shuttle program to come crashing down to Earth.
I think that was maybe the lowest day in my Galileo experience, because at that point, we didn't have a mission. We had this magnificent spacecraft that was down at Cape Kennedy, ready to be launched, and we had no way to get it to Jupiter.
By now, NASA had long since scrapped its old reliable rockets. In a word, Galileo was grounded. By late 1988, shuttle service resumed, and Galileo was given a 1989 launch date. For Torrance Johnson, it was an unforgettable year.
In January of 1989, my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so she was just out of a horrible round of surgery and chemotherapy and so forth when we went down to the Cape for the launch.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have ignition and liftoff of Atlantis and the Galileo spacecraft bound for Jupiter.
But getting to Jupiter was not going to be simple. In wake of the Challenger accident, a safety-conscious NASA had demanded the Galileo be boosted from the shuttle's cargo bay using a smaller, less explosive rocket than originally planned.
It put us back to the drawing boards trying to find a way to get to Jupiter, and with a much less powerful rocket. And our mission design engineers here did a wonderful job of coming up with some highly innovative celestial billiard shots to do that.
And the trajectory designers here found that we could start off in the wrong direction. And in fact, rather than putting our launch energy into increasing our speed to get directly out to Jupiter, we put virtually all of it into a braking maneuver to fall in toward the sun, to go off in the wrong direction.
NASA scientists had waited 15 long years for the birth of their 5,600-pound progeny, and their wait was far from over. Their bad luck was to continue, but so was their persistence. In fact, during the next 6 years, one might say, Galileo would stagger its way to Jupiter on the sheer power of positive thinking.
When we return, Galileo's remarkable 6-year journey to Jupiter in part 2 of Michael Gillen's report.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by MCI.
This isn't about why your business has to communicate better or when the time is ripe to put all the new technology to work. We're past that stage. This is about putting laptops on desks and pages in pockets. It's about email and the internet. It's about a person who puts it all together and a company that can give you the hardware and software for free. This isn't about blue sky or sci-fi or by the by. This is about now, about how. Network MCI, that's how.
It is where the lofty atmosphere of most luxury cars is left behind. It is the American-built flagship of Toyota, Avalon. Combining refined performance, comfort, and Toyota's unparalleled reputation for quality, Avalon delivers the greatest luxury of all, peace of mind. Avalon, experience the tranquility.
The State of the Union, what Americans really think on ABC's World News tonight, and later join Peter Jennings for the President's Address, tomorrow live at 9 Eastern.
Any law firm can advertise, but is selecting a law firm based on advertising alone a good idea? A law firm should be chosen with the same care you would use in selecting a doctor or any other professional. Find out about the lawyer's training, experience, reputation, and track record in handling cases similar to yours.
If you've been injured and it's somebody else's fault, you're invited to come by and learn more about us, or call for our free brochure.
Charlie Williams and Associates, 242-2800.
Plymouth's Clever Idea Department has been on a roll lately. The next challenge? Come up with clever ways to save. Now get a great lease on the redesigned Plymouth Voyager. Choose your savings on Plymouth Neon, or even get this tantalizing introductory price on the all-new Plymouth Breeze. Oh, and they even named the event. Aren't they clever?
Galileo is on its way to another world.
In the fall of 1989, after a decade and a half of waiting, Galileo was on its way, but not to Jupiter. In what surely ranks as one of the most famous examples of backwards thinking, scientists aimed Galileo in the opposite direction, towards Venus.
It does defy logic a little bit. We, of course, were originally intended for a direct flight path to Jupiter.
The problem was that Galileo's booster engine did not have enough power on its own. It needed help from Venus's nearby gravitational field, which whipped the hard-luck spacecraft around like a slingshot back towards Earth, across the dangerous river of asteroids, and on towards Jupiter.
That was the only solution. So it was a near miracle. Well, call it a miracle. It was a miracle when our trajectory designers found this remarkable solution.
With the direct route that we were originally planning, it would have taken 2.5 years. Since we had to take this kind of scenic tour of the solar system, it took 6 years.
Call it a miracle, call it a stroke of genius. Figuring out a way for the hobbled spacecraft to get to Jupiter, albeit the long way around, was a quintessential example of NASA's secret weapon, the power of positive thinking. It saved Galileo the way it once helped rescue Apollo 13.
The ability to focus our energy and effort on what we had to do at the time, I think, is a direct spin-off of this positive thinking.
Quite frankly, I never doubted that Galileo would get to Jupiter. It was always a question of how and when.
I think you need to have a feeling that you can accomplish things and overcome challenges. And that's been true in our personal lives and also in our scientific lives.
Torrance Johnson's children had been born when Galileo was a mere gleam in NASA's eye. Now, as it wended its way towards Jupiter, daughter Eleanor was in high school, playing on a winning soccer team. Son Aaron was preparing to attend his senior prom. And Galileo itself was having a most unusual streak of good luck, sending back fabulous pictures of the Earth-Moon system in action, and of the asteroids, one of which had a tiny moon circling around it, something never before seen. Galileo also just happened to be at the right place at the right time when the fragments of Comet Shoemaker Levy pummeled Jupiter's surface. Good luck quickly turned bad again, however, when in 1991 scientists commanded Galileo to open its umbrella-shaped main antenna, its primary way of broadcasting scientific data back to Earth.
We were all gathered in the control room waiting for that moment to see the indication of the antenna opening. And it did, of course, start exactly on schedule, but very quickly we saw,
oh boy, something's wrong. It shouldn't do that.
We knew, just like that we had big trouble, big trouble.
We realized that something had stuck some of the ribs in this umbrella-like device, and the motor was just trying too hard to open it up.
If you could go up to that antenna and just put your finger on the rib, you could pull it right out and solve the problem. Just the strength of your finger would solve this problem. But there's no way to get your finger out there.
For months, engineers tried everything they could to jar the umbrella open, alternately exposing it to the cold of space and the heat of the sun. They tried spinning Galileo, turning the motor on and off. When nothing worked, they pulled out that secret weapon of theirs again.
If you believe that you can do the job ahead, I think you're going to get it done.
Within literally just weeks and months, people started thinking about, okay, well, we might be communicationally challenged, but we can still make this mission work.
Fueled by the power of positive thinking, the scientists, as usual, found a way around the problem. In place of the main antenna, they relied on a combination of Galileo's smaller, slower antenna and an onboard tape recorder to store vital data. That is until, you guessed it, last October when the tape recorder broke.
We commanded it to take some pictures and then rewind, and it just kept rewinding. And, you know, if that happened to your VCR in your house, you'd worry about it a little bit.
By careful use of just a portion of the magnetic tape, JPL experts were able to restore much of the recorder's usefulness. Furthermore, with Galileo only weeks away from its destination, Johnson's daughter Eleanor and her teammates at the University of California, San Diego, won the Women's National Soccer Championship. At the time, Johnson remembers thinking,
wow, if they can play that game that well, we ought to be able to do a simple thing like get into orbit around Jupiter.
December 7th, a date that for Americans had always lived in infamy, turned out to have a positive outcome for these positive thinkers. After 2 decades of frustration, failures, and fixes, the Galileo probe took its historic plunge into Jupiter's stormy atmosphere. Meanwhile, the mothership, after a perfect main engine burn, settled into a 2-year orbit around the painted planet, together with its family of bizarre moons. Galileo's a triumph of man's curiosity and NASA's persistence, sure to answer some questions and raise many others. For Nightline, I'm Michael Gillen in Washington.
When we return, we'll be joined by an astronomer who believes that Galileo's mission to Jupiter is one of the great scientific feats of this century.
Did you know a human hair is 100 times thicker than a transistor on a microprocessor? School kids everywhere are making discoveries like this with the help of a computer education kit from Intel. The kit lets them explore the world of computers, how they work and think. At Intel, we believe that helping kids understand computers will prepare them for a brighter future. Intel, the computer inside.
Attention, persons with an asbestos-related injury. The Celotex Corporation and Kerry Canada, Inc. have filed a plan of reorganization in U.S. bankruptcy court, which establishes a trust to compensate persons who have asbestos bodily injury claims. Claims must be filed no later than March 15, 1996. Claimants with properly filed claims that are estimated by the court will be entitled to vote on the plan and considered for compensation if the court confirms the plan. For further information, call 1-800-353-5233.
Next time, a preview of President Clinton's State of the Union address.
Plus, your first look at a test tube baby gorilla.
That's next time on Good Morning America.
Hey, it's your choice. For 96 cents, you can have juicy meatballs on fresh baked bread with marinara sauce and loads of fresh cut fixins in a sandwich made right before your eyes. Or a pre-made burger. Want to see it again? No problem. So what are you going to choose? Good decision. Subway's meatball sub is just 96 cents for a limited time. Hurry in.
When snow and ice hit Middle Tennessee, turn to the News 2 Snowman Reports for the first word on school closings, road conditions, and the latest storm team forecast. Only the News 2 Snowman Report brings you continuous, up-to-the-minute school closings information. Don't spin your wheels this winter. Rely on the News 2 Snowman Report, beginning at 5:30 in the morning. The News 2 Snowman Report is brought to you by Cellular Direct, Sofa Connection, and for women only.
What kind of car did I buy? Actually, I bought a used car, but I'm not going to buy a car from just anybody. My wife drives it too. So I made sure it had the National Seal of Automotive Integrity. They can't even put the seal on a used car unless it's been inspected, and it comes with a warranty. What do I know about used cars? I know you got to have the seal. That's all I need to know.
The only dealer in Middle Tennessee with a national seal of automotive integrity is Bill Hurd Chevrolet, I-24 at Bell Road, across from Hickory Hollow Mall.
Joining us here in Washington, Dr. Richard Berenson is an astronomer and astrophysicist at the American University. Dr. Berenson, put all of this in perspective for us. How significant is what we found out today?
Well, I think it's really quite stunning. This mission, as you've already heard, has had all kinds of perils and problems. It's traveled for a very long ways over many, many years, and yet it's made it. It's already found out things about Venus, about the Earth-Moon system, about asteroids, about dust storms, about the magnetic field of Jupiter, and then the probe worked 600 million miles away from Earth, and what did we learn today? We learned that astronomy and the universe is a mysterious and wonderful place. It's not predictable. It's a bit different than what we thought, and we have still more to learn.
Well, let's talk about that, because one of the things that we kept hearing today is that now scientists are going to have to rethink their theories of the solar system. Why, and what does that mean?
Well, what it means is that there is less helium than we had thought. We found that it was drier than what we'd expected. The winds were much higher. We didn't find as much lightning as we had anticipated. And we also, of course, did not find organic molecules. Now, it would have been quite extraordinary if we had found large, complex organic molecules. We have found methane and ethane and other such organic compounds, but we have yet to find life-producing ones. On the other hand, this mission is only just beginning.
But why, from what we heard about helium and wind and all of those things, does that make us rethink all of our theories about the solar system?
Because we thought we had a reasonably good understanding of how the solar nebula some 4.5 billion years ago led to Jupiter and to Saturn. We're looking at a Rosetta Stone of how the solar system began. It's a profoundly important issue for us here on Earth, because we ourselves are made of the same kind of biology and chemistry that we think could be applying even today in the outer part of the solar system. So it's vital for us to understand Jupiter, its moons, and then ultimately Saturn.
One thing that you picked up on, and also Michael Gillen did earlier, was that we didn't find as much in the way of water molecules as we had hoped for or dreamed of. Where are we now in the search for life beyond Earth?
Well, I think several things to say. The the Jovian probe continues on, and it'll pass by the moon Europa. Europa is a curious place. It's sort of a big billiard ball of ice. We think the ice could be 60 miles thick. It's cracked like a cobweb of fracture lines, and under that there's probably an ocean. And under that ice there could well be biological life forms, and maybe the Galileo mission will tell us. And then only last week, what did astronomers find? But some 40 billion more galaxies, each of them with several hundred billion stars, at least 2 more stellar systems that contain planets not dissimilar from Jupiter. Each day, astronomy keeps providing new questions and new answers.
But you are bullish, aren't you, that we are somewhere, someplace, sometime going to find life?
Well, let's put it this way. Astronomers have not found it off of our planet yet, but there are countless other stars similar to the Sun. We now are finding that a substantial number of them apparently have planetary systems. The very chemicals from which you and I are made are out in space. We now believe that the same kind of organic processes that applied here on Earth billions of years ago could be applying even now on one of the moons of Jupiter or possibly a Saturn.
You know, we always dreamed about aliens in spaceships. If we do find on Jupiter or Saturn or one of their moons some extremely primitive form of life, as a scientist and as a thinker, what would that mean?
I think it'd be one of the most provocative, exciting, dramatic moments in all of human history. Not just for astronomy and biology and chemistry, but for everybody, for the ordinary citizen, and certainly for theologians. What it would imply would be that Earth is not the only possible abode of life in our solar system, and then just consider the rest of the universe. In all of space, in all of time, are we alone or not? There are only 2 possible answers. Either we are or we are not, and either one boggles our mind. And we think, increasingly, the evidence suggests we probably are not alone.
As a matter of pure science. You're a big supporter of Galileo, aren't you?
Yes, I am, because of the daring do of it, of the struggle, of the efforts, of the ingenuity, of going the wrong way to get someplace, of doing it on a budget that was inadequate, of postponing it after the Challenger disaster, of all the things that were learned that were never anticipated to learn in the first place. It's provided us with a wealth of information even before arriving at Jupiter, where it's supposed to get its real data.
All right, you brought up the matter of budgets. Like the rest of the federal government, NASA does face a budget cutback. You talk about the cutback that was already imposed on Galileo. That's going to be thought of as the big old, the good old days when you were able to put up 3-ton payloads, 20 feet long. And NASA's now talking about much smaller, much cheaper crafts. What would that mean?
Well, that's right. As a matter of fact, there may be one more big mega mission, and that's Cassini, which always seems to be under the congressional gun. If it is not cut, then in 1997, NASA, along with the European Space Agency, will launch a craft to Saturn, which will arrive there in the early part of the next century. And it will send a probe that'll plunge into one of the atmospheres of the moons of Saturn, Titan. And of all the places in the outer solar system that could be an abode of life, it would be Titan. But after that, there won't be any of these big missions. It'll all be the smaller, faster, cheaper variety. Indeed, you risk less, maybe you gain less.
All right, Richard Berenson, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for sharing with us and giving us your insight into a very exciting day in the history of science, and particularly your field, astronomy. Thanks for joining us. And I'll be back in a moment.